Welcome to another episode of Women in Focus, and today we've got an amazing person in the studio. She has traveled from far away, 13,000 miles to come to Vancouver. Her name is Dr. Aurogeeta Das, and she is a curator. She is a journalist. She is an activist. She cares about the lives of people who are indigenous in any part of the world. I hope all those things are accurate. We'll ask her. She is in the studio today. Most welcome in our program. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
All those adjectives, did they work?
I wouldn't call myself an activist necessarily because I use my, my writing and sometimes my art, but I don't follow the activist vein. I kind of, follow the creative path a lot more than the activist one. Sometimes the two merge, but I wouldn't call myself an activist.
Through your art or through the work that you promote, a lot of things get to the people that don't know anything about indigenous art especially. How did you get interested in that?
I hadn't actually looked at indigenous art until quite late compared to a lot of the curators I've worked with or, you know, whose work I've built upon. I've come to the scene relatively late. It was in 2005. I'd gone to an exhibition at the Museum of London. I was doing an MA in visual culture, and quite by accident I stumbled upon the work of Bhaju Shyam, who is from a sub-tribe of the Gonds. They're called Pardhan Gonds. And he had this exhibition called the London Jungle Book, and it's extremely whimsical. You know, such a strong sense of character and such a lovely sense of humor. He depicted, you know, Londoners traveling underground on the tube, and he'd shown them in the form of worms, earthworms. You know, because he said when he first went to London, he kept wondering why are the streets so empty, even Oxford Circus, for instance. Right. Which, of course, is hilarious for the British. You know, Oxford Circus is one of the most crowded places in London. But from, you know, Bhaju's point of view, compared to India, it was, the streets were very deserted. So he kept saying, you know, I wonder where all the people are. And then he said, then I went into the underground stations and I realized they're all on the trains.
Beautiful.
So, you know, he had such beautiful perspectives. So that's my entry point into this world. And once I started researching him for my master's dissertation, I realized that actually it was his uncle who had, you know, founded this very contemporary manifestation of the Pardhan Gond, you know, artworks.
Now, artists, no matter whether they are painters or writers, but in the art form, think outside of the box and always look from outside into the in. And their vision is totally different from regular person.
Yeah.
Right?
I think we do, and you know, through finding creative solutions, you do tend to think out of the box.
Yes.
And you know, particularly with indigenous artists, one of the things that really fascinates me about them is how they incorporate the old into the new.
Right.
You know, they're continuously reinventing. So this process of assimilation, of looking at a transitioning society and trying to figure out how to actually fold that into an age-old tradition. That's what excites me most about them. I've always been very fascinated by dichotomies. Any kind of, you know, so-called opposites, how do you try and bring them together? That's, I think, one of the things that I'm going to probably be obsessed about in one form or the other for the rest of my life.
You mentioned that through your writing and through curating and looking at art, you have been able to, you know, go to many different spheres of your field. How did you get, let me take you back to your childhood. Where were you born?
I was born in a place called Auroville, which is a sort of experiment in international living in the south of India. It was started by two people, well, primarily by the mother, who she's known as the mother in Pondicherry.
Oh yes.
But she was her real name was Mira Alfasa, and she was half Turkish and half Algerian, if memory serves me right. But she was born and brought up in France, and she set up a community in the south of India. So that's where I was born. And I grew up in Pondicherry, which is a former French colony in the south of India.
Now, Pondicherry and Vancouver has something in common, the rain.
Yes, but actually in Pondicherry most of the time it's really hot. So when people visited us, I used to tell them we also have 4 seasons in Pondicherry, except they're slightly different seasons. It's hot, hotter, hottest, and monsoons. That's it.
Now the monsoons don't bring. Do they bring your temperatures down, or are they still hot?
Oh no, they do bring the temperatures down. But the minimum temperature, I believe, in Pondicherry is 16. It never goes below, hardly ever goes below that.
So you must be very cold here in Vancouver.
Oh, I'm permanently cold in Britain, as well as, of course, in Canada I've been cold as well.
So being born in an experimental town or city, how was your childhood?
It was, in some ways it was idyllic, because we studied in a system where you had no exams. We had tests sometimes, but your progression to the next level wasn't dependent upon exams. We didn't have the degree system. You didn't get a degree at the end of it. You got a certificate. But because it wasn't based on exams, in one sense, it removed that burden of having to perform under pressure, and so then the focus comes on learning. Then,
right?
You're learning for the sake of learning, and that was the ideal that we were striving to. The school was striving towards. It has its drawbacks to some extent, because when you go out into the real world, then you have to negotiate with a completely different system. But I think in the long run, it equips you to think for yourself. And I think that's very positive. You can go through a period of transition and trauma when you're trying to adjust to a completely different system. But personally, I feel that in the long run, it's an advantage. I
want to talk to you about your relationship with Sotheby's in London, and your relationship with other amazing museums, and the artwork that you've brought here. And the relationship between that and our indigenous people. But let's take a short commercial break and come back. Dr. Aurogeeta Das is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is a curator. Her name is Dr. Aurogeeta Das. If I wanted to introduce you in one sentence, what would you like to be introduced as?
Someone who's always searching, I suppose. Someone who's always searching and who perhaps never gets there. But there's a lovely quotation that says, "Ideals are like the stars.
Yes,
we may never reach them, but like the ancient mariners of the sea, we chart our course by them." So I think that's probably what I'm looking for.
Beautiful. Always in a search of something,
right.
and trying to get there.
Yeah.
That has a good drive to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the journey that counts. I mean, I think the destination is always going to be that much of, it's like a mirage. You're never going to get there, really.
And those who get to their destination are lucky people.
Yes, absolutely. I admire I admire people who feel that they've arrived. I don't think I'm ever going to feel that.
No, huh?
No.
It's that thirst in you that is never going to be quenched, because it's.
Yeah, I mean, the more, as a scholar, you feel that the more you understand and the more you learn, the more you realize how little you know.
That's right. Isn't that beautiful? Beautifully said. Now, when you were growing up, what did you want to become as a grown-up person? Everybody has a dream.
Depends on what age. Until the age of about 12, maybe 14, I wanted to become a gymnast. You would never think so to look at me now, because I have terrible posture, for instance. But I did want to become a gymnast. I was an absolute fan of Nadia Comaneci. The 76 Olympics, her performance on the uneven bars, it's work of perfection.
Wow.
I mean, I could still look at her today, and I don't think there's anybody who's reached that level of grace and elegance and, you know, suppleness and, you know, everything. As a gymnast, gymnastics is one of those sports that I think combines everything, you know, strength, grace, you know, acrobatics, all of it.
Gymnast, and then what happened?
I think at some point I also wanted to, there was something that I wanted to be, but I can't quite recall now what it was that I was sort of striving towards. I think, to be perfectly honest, at the back of my mind, I think I always knew I was going to do more than one thing. I think I wanted to be a book editor at some point. That was in my teens. And I do work a lot with books. I mean, you know, I do proof people's texts.
Right.
And I edit people's texts. And so there's a little bit of that that's materialized. But I think I've always wanted to do more than one thing. I don't like the division of, especially in creative practices.
Right.
I do think that you can contribute so much more to any one art form if you understand and practice more than one art form. So I like the idea of Renaissance figures like, you know, Rabindranath Tagore, you know, or who excelled at so many different things.
Oh my God! Yes.
I mean, I'm not suggesting that, you know, but I'd like to become like that. Not that I'm anywhere close to the wonderful Tagore, but
it's still there.
Yes, again, you know, like, it's the ideal that you work towards.
That's right.
But I think I see a lot more synergy between art forms. And unfortunately, you know, we'll use the word interdisciplinarity so much nowadays, but sometimes you want just pays lip service to it.
Right.
I'd like to do more of that.
As you mentioned in your own words, different forms of art, but yet, if you look at it deeply, they are interconnected. Art, drawing, painting, work with hands is amazing, and that comes from way back, from the indigenous people of this land, or India, or Australia. You would find a similarity in their way of thinking because they are people of the earth.
Yeah.
How did you and when did you get interested in indigenous art?
Well, as I said, it was in 2005 with the Museum of London exhibition. But the more I look at them, the more one of the things that really interests me is the idea of professionalization of any profession.
Right.
So, for instance, when you're making, you know, beautiful images within a ritual context or whether in a domestic context, it's not necessarily termed art. It's termed ritual, or it's termed life in general. And I think we've lost a little bit of synergy, of coherence, of you know, a more integrative way of thinking when you kind of professionalize it and separate it out from life. In the gallery context or in the museum context, you're putting it on a wall, or, you know, of course that's with paintings, with you know, there are different forms, of course, installations, sculptures, etc. But when you do that, when you professionalize it and separate it out from life, I think you lose something. And I think, in a way, the ideal of art should be to get back to the point where art becomes experience, lived experience as well. I mean, but a conscious experience.
Right.
Where it's a little bit like Matisse. You know, if you look at Matisse, his paper cutouts are so simple.
Yet.
But there's simplicity that has been arrived at after going through a whole journey of understanding.
Right.
And I guess, in a way, art should be like that. At the, you know, the ideal scenario, it'll be when we've lived experience that's a lot more conscious, and then it doesn't have to be separated out from life.
When people ask you to come and talk to them, what is the main topic that they want you to address in all your speeches and your presentations?
Generally Indian art
Right.
history or Asian art history, sometimes curating now. I've started teaching South Asian art this year.
Right.
Before this, I was only teaching Indian art. And I'm kind of begun to teach about curating South Asian art as well. Just drawing upon my own experience
Right.
as a curator, but that's quite recent. Yeah.
I want to talk to you about the exhibition that is taking place in Surrey right now. Many visions, many versions, and you curated that. So I want to bring you back with that. Let's take a short break and come back. Dr. Aurogeeta Das is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus is Dr. Aurogeeta Das. There is a beautiful exhibition that's taking place till the 20th of March at Surrey Art Gallery called Many Visions, Many Versions. Beautiful heading. Many Visions, Many Versions.
Yes. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's Many Visions, Many Versions, art from indigenous communities in India. But we kind of went with the long title because we were trying to suggest the pluralism of the expressions of these artists. So we've got 4 different groups whose art we've looked at in this exhibition. The Warli from Western India, the Pradhan Gond from Central India, the Chitrakar from West Bengal, and the Mithila from Bihar, which is in northern state. And we were trying to suggest that although there are so many differences and distinctions, culturally they're very diverse and rich, but there are many versions of universal expressions and universal themes that they're all interested in. So we've actually chosen to depart from tradition. In earlier exhibitions, they've tended to show these communities' works by slotting them into the categories of communities. We've moved away from that and looked at the themes that they work on, and all of them work on similar themes.
I was just going to ask you that. What is the theme that is very similar in all? You've taken from the north, the east, the south, and the west of India. So you've tried to bring all of them together.
Yeah. I mean, the themes that we saw recurring in their works were myth and cosmology.
Oh, myth. Okay.
Which, storytelling genres exist in all of their works, particularly related to myth and belief systems.
Right.
Nature, whether it's real or whether it's their imagination of nature. Village life, even if they move to the city, they still, got a very strong ties to the villages that they hail from. And lastly, their contemporary explorations, their very contemporary interpretations of global events and socio-political critiques, feminist critiques, for instance.
There was one painting that really I thought was beautiful. It was a huge big tree with a lot of papayas on it or coconuts on it. I thought that was beautiful.
That has been a very popular work. That's a tree. That's a work called Jackfruit Tree.
Jackfruit Tree. That's right.
And it's from a series of works, Tree of Life series by a Mithila artist called Manisha Jha, who's also an architect who lives in Delhi. And she's an artist as well as an architect. And she's actually one of the artists in the show who's broken into the mainstream.
Wow.
So she's one of the few artists who is exhibited quite often without the Mithila artist kind of qualifying prefix being used for her.
So in the current exhibition and the exhibitions that you have curated earlier, especially in London or rest of Europe, which is the most favorite one of yours?
In terms of the exhibition or
yes.
the work?
The exhibition and work.
This is actually well, we've had 2 previous iterations of this exhibition,
right,
which were in different formats. But in some sense, this is actually only my 2nd show.
Right.
As a curator, I mean, I think as a curator, you have a tendency to curate things in your head a lot. Curators are not just people who put together exhibitions in a sense. You can be a curator when you're putting together texts. You can be a curator when you're putting together any kind of material, when you're doing that editing process.
You're right.
So in that sense, I've been a curator for
forever,
since I was at least 13 or 12. But in terms of exhibitions, this is, well, actually, this is my 3rd exhibition.
Right.
So there's another exhibition I did in Delhi called Jangar Singh Sham, The Enchanted Forest, Paintings and Drawings from the Crites Collection.
Right.
And, it's hard to pick a favorite.
But, yes, obviously. It's an unfair question.
Jangar Singh Sham, The Enchanted Forest, was a very different exhibition because it was from a single collection. It was works from the Kreitz collection in Delhi, and it was works only by a single artist as well. So that allows you to tell a different story.
Yes.
Because it's the evolution of a single indigenous artist, and that's an important story too. Because very often when you're looking at indigenous artworks, you tend to put them into groups. You don't regard them as individuals. And that the other exhibition in Delhi allowed me to tell the story of an evolution of a single artist, how he has developed over his career, and how his thinking has developed, and how his idiom has developed. And that's a beautiful story by itself. So,
what are you working on? You're always working on something.
I'm working on a number of different projects, about a dozen projects. I'm advising the National Gallery of Canada on Indigenous Indian art for their Indigenous Quinquennial in 2019, which follows on from a show they did in 2013 called Sakaha.
So there's going to be a collaboration between the indigenous art here and in India?
Well, it's an international,
right.
It's a show on international indigenous art, so from everywhere. But I'm advising on the Indian aspect. And I'm also translating a novel from the French at the moment by a wonderful writer called Shumona Sinha. So that's titled Calcutta, and that comes out in the next 8 months or so.
So your parents speak 5 to 6 languages. How many do you speak?
I don't speak them as well as my parents do, but I speak about 5.
That's great.
Hindi, Bengali, Telugu, French and English.
That's beautiful. French, eh? So the French spoken by you guys and French spoken over here in Canada is totally different.
The accent is different.
Yeah.
I think my French is Parisian because our professors were mostly from Paris.
And which is your most favorite bird?
Oh gosh, that's a very difficult question.
Because I was in India and I was in Delhi, and there is a place where Lodi Gardens.
Yes. And
they had a lot of beautiful birds there. And lately we've fallen in love with a hummingbird. It comes and visits our house quite often.
Yes.
So they are the smallest bird and the fastest in the world.
Yes, I saw Alan's hummingbirds last year in California. It was quite an experience. Yeah, but I can't pick a favorite. I love birds.
I love birds too. Hey, thank you very much for being our Woman in Focus today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Dr. Aurogeeta Das has been our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back.